Alright, today I'm going to show you how to take apart our 100 by 17 machine and replace a photocell. This is a pretty simple process, but there is kind of a lot of steps. So just to get started, so you're going to need a screwdriver, Phillips head, 5.5mm socket, a couple Allen keys, metric, and then I've got some various heads here just in case. So to get started, you're going to first take off the bracket. And then all you have to do on that is unscrew these. And you want to take the back ones back here all the way out. One thing I would recommend, I don't have one, but is a bucket to put all of your spare parts in. As you take this apart, you're going to have a lot of screws and little bitty pieces. So you'll want to make sure that you have somewhere safe to put them so that you don't lose them. So we'll slide that off and just set this aside. And then once you do that, the next thing you're going to do is, you can kind of see here, all of these metric Allen keys right here, all need taken out. There's 5 of them, I believe, and then you can just pull this off, and we'll set that to the side. Now, when you're doing these, you have to be careful because they are so small. They do strip easily. So make sure that while you're doing these, if you have one that's really tight, don't try to work it too much, because what will end up happening is you'll strip the screw out and you'll have to either break the face plate or the drill out the hole to replace it. So I've taken these two out, and then on this side you'll see you've got the MAC valve. I'll have to take that off, and then there's one right there, and then one directly below the MAC valve. So we'll take that off. It's just 2 Allen keys right here. And once you take these off, one thing I like to do is unhook it from the air hoses, just to get it out of the way as you're going through. You don't want a bunch of stuff hanging down, so we'll do that as well. Again, lots of small parts, so just put them in the same spot. These are quick release, so push in and pull out, and we'll get that. And now those are free. Underneath, you'll have the one screw there. You have to undo. Mine's already gone. So from there, what you're going to have to do is there's 2 types for these. We have the one that has the cord coming out of the handle, and then one that comes out on the side. If you have the one on the side, the next step will be to take off this face plate. For this one, it's a little more difficult, so I'm going to walk you through how to take this apart. But once we get this off, it'll basically be the same. So there's an Allen key right here that needs done, and you'll see that it's kind of interfered with this handle, so it should slip in there, but if not, a little bit of pressure and you can get it to fit in there. And then you'll break that free and just slide this off. And it's free. So you can see it's still not coming real loose. The reason for that is the cable's inside. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our screwdriver, and on this handle there are 3 screws that you need to take out. So we'll take those out. And when we get back to this, it's very important to watch where your screws are going back in, because you'll see once this is open, but the cables, the way that they're oriented in the handle, there's a little bit of an ability to send the screw through the cable and damage the cable, so you want to be careful about that. Alright, so you'll take that loose, and then it's still attached on the back side, but this should help us loosen up this cable to get in behind here. Now this is kind of the trickiest part of this whole thing. You can't really see, I'm going to try to bring my camera over here. In there, you see those two screws, and then there's two on the other side, on the bottom there. So you'll need to get all of those out, and then what that'll do is release the handle, give us some space to work with when we're trying to pull the handle off. So I'll go ahead and start. You only have to take one side of this off to accomplish this. So whatever the easier side is, it doesn't really matter. So I usually just take off this left-hand side because it's the easiest one for me to get off on my machine. And again, just being careful not to strip out anything as we're going through. These are in tight spots, so you want to make sure that you're careful. Okay, now once we have that off, you can take that side off. You can see here what it's going to look like inside. So it sits like this. That screw hole right there, that's the one we have to worry about when we take it back and put it back together. Because if you hit, you know, the power cable or the air hose or the trigger switch, you'll render them useless and then you'll have to replace those. So you want to be very careful. So we'll take those and kind of pull them out here. And now once you've done that, you can slide this back. You can take and work with that to get it all the way off. I never do. To me, it's a lot more work than it's needed because now you're free. So what you have is you can just pull this off. Now the E-stop here, you have to push that button down and pull this out and try to pull it as square as possible. And this will slide out as well. So now you're into kind of the guts of the machine, and I'll take and bring my camera over here and kind of show you what we're looking at. So in here you have, let me clean this up a little bit. So right here you'll have the Y motor. Over here you have the X. The photocells we're going to replace, the first one is right here. As you can see, it's kind of embedded with the motor, so we'll have to move the motor out of the way to take this one out. The Allen key to take it out is right here. Let's see if I can get it to focus. And you can't get in there to take that out without removing the motor. And then the other reason is back there. That's the other one. Now you can take this one out without taking the motor off or anything like that, but if we're going to replace both of them, you might as well take the motor out because it'll make it a lot easier process as we go through all of this. And I forgot to mention in the beginning, but make sure that you're unplugged from your controller, unplugged from any power source. You are working with electronics, so just making sure that you're safe. So what we're going to do to start, I'm going to unplug each photocell. And I'm actually going to unplug the Y motor as well. And it's a little tight back there. Anytime you're working with these small machines, they get a little tight, but it comes out like that. So the next thing you'll need to do is on here you have your 5.5 millimeter, which is right here. You'll break that loose. And these are long screws to slide all the way through. So you pull that one out, put it there, and just keeping a note of which one goes where. On this one, the bottom left and the top right are these 5.5 millimeters, and then I have a set screw right here, and you'll see it's got a spacer underneath it that as long as you loosen that up, you can slide everything out. And then you have this keeper on this side. So here you're not going to be able to get down into there. Let me see if I can show you. because of the way that the pillar is. So what you're going to do is go get a hex crescent wrench, or if you have the actual size, I believe I have it here, but if you have the actual size, I think it's a 5.5, so regular wrench, and you can use that. And give me just a second and I'll pull that up. Okay, so I've got my 5.5 millimeter. So we're going to take this one off. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is actually slide this down and pull the belt off. And these are not fun to do, but you'll have to do it to get this out of the way. If you're lucky and the belt's a little loose, you can potentially show you. So what you're trying to do is, I can get this to focus. This screw right here and this screw right here. So you can see it's pretty close. I'll probably be able to get an Allen key in to get that one off, and I won't have to take the belt off. If you can do that, it's much better. But if not, you'll just take the belt off, pull this photocell off, and then when you get back, feed this back on. So we'll go ahead and try it without it, and that way it makes life a little bit easier. When you're doing these, you don't have a whole lot of room to operate, so you're going to slowly take them off. Then once you get it off, there are two types of photocells that we have on these machines. So the one we're taking off right now looks like this. So it's got the two on the side. So we'll take those off, and then for the sake of this video, I'll leave it on because I assume you guys know how to undo two screws. Once you get that one off, on the back side, let me tighten this back down. On the back side, you have the same thing. You have one screw for the Y, for the Y, or the X, I'm sorry. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to slide this out of the way, the opposite way. And again, you can take this all the way off if you need to. I try not to, just because I find that it's more work getting it put back on than it's worth whenever I can get back there. So you can see that's one screw. You just take that, undo that one, and then replace it. There's no set in on that. It's just free floating. So when you replace it, just you'll slide it in, put the screw in, and try to thread it on that way. Make sure that you notice. Let me grab a Photocell for you. On these, you'll see this. Make sure that on this machine that you've got the right side facing. Only one side has the backer, so make sure that you take note of that before you take it all the way off. So once you remove that and replace it, tighten it down. The backer should be facing this towards the belt. Then we'll go back in and we'll plug it all back in. And again, this motor cord here is a little tricky to get in there, but it will go. And if you've got a pick or something like that to help you, that's always a nice add-on. So I got it in there. So we'll put those on. I'm going to come back in. And now we're going to start putting it back together. So the first thing, we'll set these up. You want to make sure that belt's nice and tight. And if you ever are struggling to get that pushed in there, there is a spacer in between the motor and the bracket, and a lot of times that's what's going to be in the way. I usually don't tighten that down all the way, that way I can put this other side on there and then straighten it up to make sure that the motor is in line. At any point, you can test this by rotating the head. So you'll see the head is here. You just push this up and down. You can watch the belt move. Just make sure there's no slack in it. Make sure that it's moving freely. It looks good there. So now I'll just tighten that down. Alright, so now we're tight. Go ahead and plug in your new photocell here for your Y. And again, on these, just like the other one, you'll notice that the backer is, there's only one backer. So you want to make sure that the backer on this one is on this side. Once you get that done, you'll start putting it back together. So first thing we're going to do, slide this casing back on. Make sure you don't catch any cords while you're doing it. And what I like to do at this point is put this top one back in just to hold this in place. Before you actually put this on, I actually forgot, you'll need to put this back together. Now you can still put this on. This is kind of a quirky way to do this, but I've found that it makes life a little bit easier in my opinion. But you can do this either way. So what I do is I tighten this on just so it holds steady, and you'll have to take this back off once you get this on. But what it'll do is it'll help you align these cables, because the cables are pretty tightly wound in there. Getting them aligned can be a beast. So what you want to do is make sure that everything is out of the way. So this is typically how I go about it, is putting it in this one first, and this goes behind all the other cables. And they've got the washer sets, or the nut sets in there to hold in place. So make sure that your alignment is correct. You'll set that in there. Set that one in, and you do have all of this cable will end up being pushed back in to the machine. But what I want to do is get this on, and it actually went together pretty well this time. Usually it's a little more tedious than that. So now I'll loosen this so that I can push that air hose back in and align the last air hose. Just being careful not to get them misaligned. Alright, and we're free. So we're going to lock that one in. I'm going to just pull this air hose. Okay. And again, this is the trouble you run into with this. Okay, so now everything's fit in. We'll take this other side, clamp it in, being careful not to pinch. You can see right there I was pinching a little bit. And what's currently happening, and I know that it's difficult to see, is that this power cable is in the way of that screw. So I'm trying to get that set up to where we don't crunch that. And now we're back together. And what I like to do is look in there and make sure that you can actually see the threading on the other side. Now once you've got that together, like I said, I like to look in there, I can see the threading on all of them. There's nothing interfering with it. So now we'll take our screws and start them back in. These are injection molded parts, so make sure you don't over tighten them. They don't need a whole lot to maintain. Okay, now once you have that done, we'll go ahead and turn this to the side. We'll put these two screws in from the handle. These will hold it in place. And like I said before, these are not the easiest to get to, so if you struggle with this a little bit, don't feel bad. I typically run that same issue. Okay, so when this goes back together, this cable or this air hose here, there's a groove right there that's going to sit in. So as we set this in, it's going to end up sitting like that. So just make sure you're watching that as you're tightening everything back down. And we'll go back up here. Align this up. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and put these screw in underneath the MAC valve, and then put the MAC valve back on. That's these Allen key screws here. One thing to keep in note here is your housing may not align perfectly, so you're going to want to make sure that you align the holes so that you can get this started. Okay. All right, and we're back together there. Now just go back through and you can put your e-stop back on. Align those holes and put the remaining screws in on here. Again, these are very small screws. Do not over tighten these, because the next time if you ever have to get in here, they set a little tighter than when you originally put them in, and you'll never be able to get them out. So I like to go just flush with the housing. Don't want to over tighten them. Just make them to where they're not going to catch on anything when they're out and about. Alright. Last step is we're going to put these in. And these actually do hold the bracket back here in place, so You'll always need to make sure they're set up. Don't over tighten them, because when we go to put the bracket back on, you'll have to loosen them back up. So just get them started. Everything's tight. Take the bracket. Slide it back in place. And we've replaced the photocells on the machine. Now, a lot of questions we get on these is, how do I know when the photocell's failing, or how do I know that it is a photocell and not something else? So the number one indicator for a photocell failure is if you start your machine up and it says 0 positioning failure, that's indicative of a photocell. Before you take the machine apart, make sure that your connection in the back of the controller is connected all the way and tightened down. We find a lot of times that what we see is guys will have a machine and maybe the pins are broken in the back or something like that, and it's just floating in there, and over time it'll kind of unseat itself and pull itself back out just a bit, and that'll also cause it to say 0 positioning failure. The other two most common things that we'll see is if the head itself stays in the same spot, marks over top of one another, that's indicative of a photocell failure. And the last thing would be is if it tries to run out of bounds. So if you hear it start to jam up, and then it'll say 0 positioning failure on the screen. That's the most common things that we see. All of those also happen whenever you have a loose connection in the back. So the first thing you always want to do is check that connection. But if you see those, your next best bet is to replace the photocells at that point. Thanks, guys.